Hi everyone, and congratulations for hanging on till the fourth session. We've got another six to go, but we're almost halfway through. I'm going to start off this session with just mopping up a couple of issues that were raised during last session. They weren't part of the program, but they were raised and they're interesting questions, and I want to relate to them. The first one was the topic of translanguaging. What is translanguaging? I think Marianne raised that. And then Michelle came back at me over dictations and added some important stuff that I think is worth sharing this time. And then Sarah raised the point about, which I mentioned in passing, the way international English is changing and what this means for us as teachers, what we treat as correct and what incorrect. So I'll start off with mopping up these topics and then get on to the main topic of this session, which is motivating students to write and overcoming their reluctance, use of language play and games, and addressing different levels or needs of learners in a mixed class. And then, as usual, an assignment. Remember, you only have to do 5 out of the 9 assignments which I'll be giving, but this is assignment 4, and then, as usual, a classroom activity. Okay, so we'll start off with the topic of translanguaging. Has become very in-word over the last 10, 15 years. In general, what it means is moving between one language and another when you're talking to someone who speaks more than one language, which you share in order to express ideas more easily or precisely. And you probably come across this when you're teaching with other members, talking with other members of the staff, of your English staff, whether you're speaking Hebrew or Arabic or English, you shift between mother tongue and English every now and again and put in a word in the other language, don't you? So for example, Arabic speakers speaking to a Hebrew speaker would use, Arabics would use beseder as if it were an Arabic word, but actually it's Hebrew. And Hebrew speakers say ahlan wa sahlan as if it were a Hebrew word, and actually it's Arabic. But they come in quite naturally to our discourse when we're speaking to someone else who we know will understand us. And it's an easy way to communicate, in a natural, very natural way to communicate in a multilingual context. Even complete sentences. I found myself speaking to a friend the other day. We both come from the UK, but at some point we just switched to Hebrew because we were talking about something that we could express more easily in Hebrew, and we both knew both languages. The example I want to give you from a whole community is Philippine speech. I don't know if any of you have ever seen on Netflix a Philippine movie and looked at how they're talking to one another, the characters. And they're speaking in English, but they keep switching to Tagalog, which is the local Filipino speech, and then back again to English. Some of it you understand and some of you don't, and you really need the subtitles to keep you in there. But that's a really extreme example of a whole community which speaks 2 languages all the time. In the classroom, actually, translanguaging came in first in the research, was first mentioned in the classroom context. What it means is freely making use of both languages, or all 3 languages in some cases, in order to promote knowledge of the target language. So you've got your eye on teaching English all the time. That's your main goal, but you may sometimes switch to mother tongue if this is going to promote your goal. And you remember last session I suggested various uses of Hebrew or Arabic in the English lesson. I even gave you a assignment to try and use some of them in class. I'd be interested to hear how it went. But these are all examples of what is called translanguaging. It's increasingly studied, and I went into Google Scholar and looked at the number of pieces of research on translanguaging. And I looked at articles with translanguaging in the title. Obviously, there are many more which don't have translanguaging in the title and still talking about it. But I limited myself to ones which actually set out explicitly to talk about translanguaging. So between 2000 and 210, there were only 10 articles on it. It only just come in. But suddenly between 2010 and 2020, you suddenly got 2000. How many do you think you got between 2020 and the present day? A rough guess. Anybody?
Probably
Another
5.
2,000 more?
10,000.
1,000,000.
No, but you're not
10,000.
far off. Suddenly you get almost 5,000 hits. It's got steeply going up. In other words, it's a very in topic at the moment, and it's a very sort of if you don't use mother tongue in the classroom to help you, that sort of labels you as a boomer. You're sort of not with it. And then Gen Z and Gen Alpha are using translanguaging as part of the technique of teaching another language, and indeed in general discourse and conversation outside the classroom. Okay, Mayan, I hope that answers your question. If you have any more, then write them in the chat box. I'm going to move on to the second thing which came up as a result of last week, and that is the topic of dictations. And I said, which was so much of an overgeneralization actually to be wrong, and I'm allowed to be wrong like anybody else. I said dictations are tests. They're not always tests. It depends how you prepare them. And Michelle put me right on this one. They are tests if they're given out of the blue, okay, with no preparation at all. Just write these 10 words. Then they function indeed as tests. But if they are prepared, and so that the students are likely to get them right, then they're very likely to function actually as teaching and reinforcement techniques, not as tests. So, for example, you might do some of these, and some of these I got from Michelle, and some of them, one or two of them, are my own, I think. But the goal, anyway, overall goal, is to familiarize the students with the meanings and spellings of target words, so that when you do your dictation, they're going to get it right, and it's going to function as a reinforcement. So you start off obviously by teaching the words, and then perhaps copying them out in alphabetical order just to get them to engage with the spelling. Do gapful exercises with the gap word bank. Then do a dictation which is gapped. In other words, you give them, say, the first and last letters of the words, or some of the letters of the words, and you ask them to fill in the missing ones. And only then do you do the dictation, by which time they're likely to do it right and see it as reinforcement. An alternative to conventional dictation is translation dictation, where you actually say the word in the student's mother tongue and ask them to write it in English, which makes sure that they're not only writing it but also understanding it. Though, incidentally, I have to say in parentheses here that even if you say it in English, ask them to write it in English, it has been found that it's almost impossible to write something down from dictation if you don't understand it. If someone dictates you a word in Polish or in, I don't know, in Chinese, in some word language which you don't know, you're very unlikely to be able to write it down correctly, or even hear it correctly. Whereas if you know it, you're likely to get it right. So if you do a dictation, even if it's English to English, this is a fairly good indication that the students can understand the word. Okay, I'll just pause for a second. Michelle is just putting up the attendance, so can you just put yourselves in there, and I'll carry on meanwhile with the next topic, which I think is a really fascinating one. Ways English is changing and what is correct. Pronunciation is one. It's not really relevant to this course, but I'm bringing it up anyway because it's a fun one. A pronunciation of English internationally is moving predictably towards similarity with spelling or towards regular rules. So if you take a word like often, okay, I say often without the T because that's how I was brought up and that's how I say it naturally. It's more and more being pronounced with the T because that's how it's spelt, and it's a perfectly legitimate pronunciation. These next two examples came from actually listening to, the first one was a podcast by Yuval Noah Harari, who speaks very, very good English and has written books in English. And he said the word prevalent. Now, I would say prevalent. He said prevalent because it's regularly in English, the emphasis is on the second syllable if the first syllable is just a prefix like pre. So you get preferment with the emphasis on the second syllable, precaution with the emphasis on the second section. It makes sense that prevalent should also have the emphasis on the second, although I would say naturally prevalent. What would you say, Gail? Prevalent or prevalent?
Prevalent.
What?
Prevalent.
You would say prevalent. That's interesting. David, what would you say? Can you turn on your
Sorry, I would say prevalent as well. I
prevalent
don't
as
know,
well?
maybe
Yeah.
it's American.
I
I
would
don't know.
also
Maybe it's
say,
American. Maybe I hadn't thought of that.
Prevalent.
Maybe it's
I
an
say
American one.
prevalent. I say prevalent. Yeah.
I would say
Um,
prevalent.
I'd say
If I may,
prevalent.
if I may, I think because it loses the I would say prevalent. If it had the I
Oh,
still
thank you,
from
Joe. Someone
prevail.
okay. Anyway, but the thing is that he said prevalent, and it didn't worry me. It sounded okay. So I think it's perfectly okay. I think they're just two possible variations or variants. The same thing with the next word. How would you say the next word that's up there?
Admirable.
Admirable. Okay, so I was talking to Batya Laufer, who's a linguist who specializes in vocabulary, and she said admirable. And again, it didn't worry me. Okay, it's not how I would pronounce it, but it didn't worry me, and it fits in with the general rule of pronunciation that you don't put the stress on the first syllable if the first syllable is a prefix, like adorable, for example, the emphasis on the second. So this is just a sort of a slight digression from our main topic that's nothing to do with, or not much to do with writing, but I thought it was an interesting one. And there's one last one I want to add, and that's this one.
Comfortable.
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 How many syllables does it have?
Comfortable.
Four.
Three. Comfort.
Four.
Four.
Okay.
Comfortable.
In my, I naturally would give it 3. Comfortable. Comfortable.
Really?
It is increasingly pronounced with 4, comfortable, because that's how it's spelled. And this is another example of how pronunciation is beginning to be influenced by spelling, and to pronounce it with 4 syllables is perfectly acceptable and easy to understand. Okay, next.
Are there rules? Are there rules for pronunciation anywhere that I could find?
Don't know. Try checking on the internet.
All right.
The AI bots overdo it with pronunciation feedback. They can drive you crazy.
Grammar and vocabulary, again, are changing, and so I'm going to give some examples which actually people suggested last week. For example, I'll do it when I will see you, when with will coming after it, when the rule tells us first conditional, it should have the present tense, okay? Similarly, looking forward to see you. You find it all over the place. It should be, strictly speaking, to seeing you, but because of the to, which normally has a simple infinitive after it, so people are tending to say look forward to see instead of looking forward to seeing you. This is another one which came up last week, and you hear it all over the place. If something would happen, if I would see, if I would have, very, very common. Vocabulary differences. This is one which disinterested, uninterested. Is there a difference between the meaning of these two words? Anybody?
Disinterested and uninterested.
I
Do they
think
mean the
so.
same or different?
Different.
Slightly
I think
different.
disinterested
different-
is more like a dish. It's not like a
Disinterested
have
is
no interest.
yeah.
Uninterested is more actively uninterested.
Okay, the way I was brought up was to understand disinterested as unbiased. You made a disinterested decision, and uninterested means not interested. And if you, I checked it on the internet, and the AI definition at the top of the page was that disinterested meant unbiased and uninterested meant bored. I went to Webster Merriam Dictionary, and they said, yes, disinterested means unbiased and uninterested means not interested, but also disinterested can mean the same as uninterested. So I'm going to have to give in here and just accept that they can be used as synonyms, and they are increasingly used in synonyms by a lot of English speakers, native, non-native, all over the place. So I'm giving up on that one reluctantly, because I really like the original reason, the original meaning of disinterested. This is one I mentioned last week and has come up in a lot in research on the developing language, and it is very well established that in modern research articles accepted by peer-reviewed journals, reputable journals, research is being used in the plural and as a single count noun with a. And this is something which I've stopped correcting it. I'm just giving in on this one.
I'm
But it's something
flabbergasted.
What?
I'm flabbergasted. I've
Yeah,
never
yeah.
encountered that.
Yeah, well,
Research
it's,
hits. I've
look in
corrected
the
students.
check it out on the internet. You'll find an awful lot of examples. There's a lot of what we would call perhaps mistakes with prepositions because of the influence of other languages. So, for example, people talk about discuss about instead of to discuss something, or conscious about instead of conscious of, or depend from instead of depend of. You find these all over the place because this is
that's
how other
acceptable?
languages, many other languages apparently express them.
But you accept
Okay, bottom
that
line,
as
what are we
correct
going to do
English?
about all this? Implications for teachers, and I'm going to suggest an implication, then throw it open to your responses. I think we need to make a distinction. We need to make a distinction between awareness as professionals, professional users of the language and teachers of the language, and classroom practice. We need to be aware that these changes are taking place, and we need to be on the lookout for them, and be aware that they are happening, and be aware when they are prevalent or prevalent. However, many are not yet acceptable as correct for Bagrut assessment purposes, and for the foreseeable future, I think you are going to have to carry on teaching the conventional forms. Question mark. Okay, what does anybody think? Please reply in the chat box.
I want to ask about, for example, in the 8th grade, I have to teach now the models, okay? Now there are all the models, and then I have to start and explain them, the differences between the might and may. And I mean, like, I can't see any, I mean, we know the differences by rules, but when we hear them and when we use them, we actually use, whatever, and they have not really any difference.
I think, Sharona, there are some rules which are more important than others, and might and may is a minor rule. I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah, exactly. So I think we agree on this. I wouldn't worry about it.
I told them just use whatever, because
I think someone the chat box is moving. I'm just trying to go back to something which was said by Moshe, which is quite important, I think. He says that I risk saying that international English, that is English spoken by non-natives, will become a distinct language with different dialogues influenced by different L1s. Yes, I think, Moshe, what is happening is that we are seeing Englishes developing, as you say, different by different Israeli English and Polish English and Hungarian English and German English, and certainly Chinese English, but there also has to be an international language that is internationally understandable so that people can communicate with each other, whether it's in business or politics or social connections or culturally, whatever. These things are happening side by side. The development of different Englishes locally and the development of an international English understood by everyone. I want to get on to our main topics. So, yes, Sarah says quite rightly, let's keep our comments in the chat box, otherwise we won't progress enough. Yes, okay. This will inevitably, Moshe says quite rightly, this will inevitably influence English as it is spoken in English-speaking countries. English is spoken will live on a little longer. Yes, certainly, I agree with you. Yeah. Okay. Michelle has just noted that the attendance form is closing in 4 minutes. Please make sure you sign in if you have not yet. And I need to move on to our main topics here. Our main topic, actually, motivating students to write. Now, I'm going to make you work a bit here. And remember, I reminded you to have pencil and paper by you. So please, will you take your pencil and paper and write on it this very simple table. So 2 columns with the left-hand column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the right-hand column headed score from 1 till 3. And I'll give you a couple of a minute or two to write that. It's fairly simple, and then I'll explain what I want us to do. Okay, I've done that, so I assume most other people will have as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do with you 5 different activities, and I'm going to ask you how motivating they are. For activity 1, for example, I want you to score it on a rate of 1 to 3. First of all, I want you to try doing it, and secondly, score it, estimating how many of the students in your class would find it motivating to do. So if you've got to 1, you think, well, almost nobody would do this, they'd hate it, or they'd be very unmotivated. The score of 2 means some of them would find it motivating, others wouldn't. And number 3 would mean I imagine that most of the students in my class would find it motivating to do. Now, the level of these activities, something around 8th, 9th, 10th grades, sort of junior high level, which they should be able to do from the point of view of their mastery of English. Okay, you ready? Can someone give me a thumbs up or say yes? Or no,
Yes.
as the case may be.
Yes.
Yes, we're ready.
Okay, let's go. So remember, what I want you to do is perform, or I'll give you a couple of minutes each time to do as much of the exercise as you can, and then write on your table whether you found it 1, 2, or 3 level of motivation. Here's activity 1. Write down all the things you could use a pencil for other than write or draw. For example, point to something. Okay, 2 minutes to write down as many things as you can think of you could use a pencil for.
Sorry, we're doing the activity or we're
You're
just
doing
rating
it.
it?
You're doing it, guys.
And also
Your
rating
work.
it.
You came here
Okay.
to work, didn't you? Not to let me do all the work. You're doing it, and then you're giving it a score. Okay, time's up. Could you please write a score of how motivating you think your students would do to do this exercise? Okay, done that? Just for fun, could some of you write in the chat box any of the ideas you had? Yeah, very nice. Okay, very creative. Right. Second activity, please. And again, a minute and a half, 2 minutes to do it. Write a short paragraph about what you did last weekend. Starting now. And again, I'll give you a minute and a half to do it. Okay, time's up. Could you please give that a score? Leora, you wanted to say something? Or you just got your hand up, says here. You don't have to give your score in the chat box, please. I want you to do it on paper. I want you to have a record on paper. Okay, so if you haven't written it on paper, please will you do so now and not in the chat box. Thank you. Okay, activity 3. I want you, please, again for a minute and a half, to write some sentences to tell me one of the following, or both if you like. Things that help you if you're feeling down, things that help you if you can't sleep at night. And I've given you a scaffolding sentence. If you want to use it, you don't have to. Okay, a minute and a half. Okay. Can you give that a score, please, between 1 and 3 on your paper? And if you feel like it, share with us some of the things that you wrote that help you in the chat box, just for fun. Taking a walk, if you're feeling down, yeah, listen to music, eating ice cream. This is all relating to the first one, I gather. Yeah. Yeah, cleaning the house. Well, well, well. Lovely, lovely. Okay, thank you very much for those. Move on to activity 4. Odd one out. The task here is as follows. Write reasons why each of the members of this list could be the odd one out. A horse, a spider, a butterfly, a bird, a fish. For example, a horse is the only one you can ride. Okay, you'll probably only need a minute for this one, but as long as it takes you. Reasons, so you'll need 4 sentences actually, why each of the members of this list could be the odd one out. Okay, beginning now. Write on your paper, not in the chat box.
But where's the sentence?
Okay, giving you only a minute for this one. I think that was long enough. Can you give that a score, please, from 1 to 3 on your table for interest, how interested your students would be to do this one? Not writing it in the chat box, but on your table, on your paper. And the last one, write down all the differences you can think of between the 2 pictures, picture A and picture B, or if you like, girl A and girl B. Okay, a minute and a half from now to write on your paper. Okay, can you give that one a score of 1 to 3 on how motivating your students would find it to do? Let's just have a little time to discuss those in the breakout rooms. Don't change your tables because I'm going to check them in a moment, but just to discuss how you felt about those different things, anything anyone would like to share about them. Gail, can you divide into breakout rooms for 5 minutes, 10 minutes? See how long, let's say 10 minutes. Is it working? Okay. Please join your breakout room.
I can't send the room invitation again. You need to click on the 3 dots or where you see breakout rooms, and then you will see it then.
I was moved back. I don't know why. I didn't press anything. Can I
Go
join the
back.
room again?
What room are you in?
10. That's weird.
So, first of all, I want you to fill in, before we have the discussion, I want you to fill in the poll which Gail is about to display, I hope, if it works for her. And then we'll see the results and then we'll discuss, okay? I won't be able to hear every breakout room, of course. I've asked Gail to nominate 4 people of those who raise their hands, and we'll just hear a sample of what people have been talking about. But first, I'd like to do the poll. So over to you, Gail.
Okay, so I've posted the link to the poll in both our WhatsApp group and in the chat from the Zoom. And I will share the results. Where did they
Okay,
go?
so we'll give you a minute
I'm
or
not
two.
seeing it here in the chat. Could you
fill
put it
in.
again? Sorry.
It's not in the chat.
No, it's not
I
in the
don't-
chat.
It's there.
It's the Google form. It's Google Docs. Maybe that's why you don't see it.
Google Docs? I thought that was.
Okay, it's here.
No, it's on Google
Now I see
Forms
it. Maybe
in the
I came
WhatsApp
back.
group.
Uh-oh.
I can see it.
Yeah, I did it
Oh.
already. It worked.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, is it working for you?
Yes.
Good.
Penny, just one quick question someone asked in the chat. Do we encourage them to do this in L1 or in English?
In English. This is English writing exercises. Do you want me to take down my share?
I took
Right.
it down. I took it
It
down.
is down. Okay.
I just came in and took control.
Well done. Great.
هذا الفوت كان حدا يطقطق
It's very small on my screen. How do I make it bigger?
I'll
You're making
make
it
it
bigger.
bigger.
Thank you. Okay. Let's look at some of the results here. What do the colors show? Gail, I can't see for the moment.
I know something jumped here. Okay, so blue is none or few.
Donna is saying, could you let me in? She was disconnected. Okay, so
I'm watching the
Can you see admit, Michelle, for the
so
Zoom?
one,
I've been admitting.
how many of your students do you think would be motivated to do activity 1?
إنه بطلع 85 بول هاي بحالة about
uses of a pencil. Okay, and for this, the majority were some, and slightly more said most of them. So it's some plus. Can we go on to the next one? Very few said nobody would be interested. Number 2, last weekend, nearly half said none, and about 2/3 say none or some, and only a few said most. I'm just jotting down the results for myself. Activity 3, what helps you? And this again, the first, can you turn off your microphones for the moment? And just want to summarize what we're seeing here. The majority said some or most, and only a minority said none. Number 3 was what helps when you feel. So that was a sort of fairly positive one. Number 4, the odd one out. Again, only a very small majority said nobody would do it, and most said some or most. And number 5, I think this was the most popular one, wasn't it? Pictures. So the vast majority said most. Okay, that's an interesting results. Gail, will you be able to post this on the Moodle?
It's posted on the Moodle. The link to see the results
It's
is
posted already. Great. Okay, I'll study it in more detail later, but certainly for now, that was a very interesting result. Okay, before I post anything else, Gail, could you nominate 4 people to, people raise your hands if you'd like to say anything about these results or about how you felt while doing them, any conclusions you drew which came out of the discussion.
Okay, Beth, you're first. So
You said me? Okay. I found the ones where you had to brainstorm and think creatively were just much more interesting for me to do, and I would think my students also would like that challenge. You know, it
For
wasn't just writing
example?
something, you know. The first one, then the last 2. You know, it required brainstorming. So
Yeah.
that's what I liked about them.
Lisa?
Okay, so one of the biggest things that I felt about that, okay, I've got a weak class of 3-4 pointers, they would struggle to do this exercise in English. So I would be very happy for some suggestions. A strong group of English speakers would possibly love the more challenging ones of having to think a bit deeper about, you know, uses of a pencil or what's the odd one out. I love that. But for a weaker student, and we had an interesting discussion how to help a weaker student with this conversation, by like a pencil, picking up all different types of verbs that you could do with a pencil, write them on the board in Hebrew, then translate them into English and introduce a whole new vocabulary list of verbs. But this would be all of these would be challenging for a weak student who has very little English vocab.
Can I ask a question, Penny?
Yeah.
Why would you think of focusing productive activity on putting an emphasis on the grammar rather than just trying to get them to get something out, as long as you can understand it?
Which ones were focusing on grammar? Obviously the weekend was past tense, but anything else?
No, Lisa mentioned that she would be
Lisa
working very
mentioned.
difficult.
No, I'm not focusing on, not meaning to focus on grammar. I'm meaning to focus on getting them to write down things.
בימים האחרונים, לא רק היום, איזה רצף, כבר כמעט שבוע בעצם, איזה רצף עדכון.
But I think in the odd one out, they can write very simple sentences like a butterfly is pretty or a fish swims in water. It doesn't have to be something like really bombastic.
No, I think we just need to be very careful because if we put too much focus on grammar, they're going to lose confidence and they're not going to do anything. The weak students. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
So
we'll talk about
yeah, okay.
That's the main focus next week, I think. But for the moment, I'm just looking at tasks to induce them to express themselves in writing. Not worrying about mistakes and stuff.
Okay, who's next?
If there's nobody, then I'll move back to my
Okay.
screen.
I raised my hand. May I say something and try and be brief? Or do you want to go on?
No, you can go on.
Penny.
Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
I just wanted to share that in our group, first of all, we mentioned that our personal assessment of some of them was probably higher than we figured junior high students might give it. So I think there is an age factor here in how motivating some of the tasks were. We also discussed that in some places it might be more motivating. For example, Jo in my group said she had struggled with the find different uses for a pencil, which I loved and felt challenging. And we said that we could add to the basic task to perhaps make it more motivating by scaffolding for the woman before me who said it might be difficult, like maybe give them some hints like food related things or weapon related things, and by adding a game element of it, perhaps a competition. How many can you think of in 15 seconds? And how many can two of you think of, and then make it be four of you? And we all felt, I think part of the reason why find the difference in the pictures seemed the most appealing to our students is that the task is very clear cut. It's not as sort of boring as a paragraph, sorry. And it's not as challenging as what's a non-writing use of a pencil. So it's just sort of more in their, what's that, proximal zone of doability. Let me misquote Vygotsky majorly.
Okay, let's come back and have a look again at these activities and try and draw some useful conclusions for our own teaching. In some of them, I gave scaffolding, some of them I didn't. Look, activity 1, for example, can you see the screen now?
Yes.
I wrote a sample structure, okay, 2 point to something. So it would be 2 whatever, and it gives them some kind of scaffolding. Activity 2 had nothing, it was just write a short paragraph. Interestingly, it was the one which got the least votes. It was the one which people found most boring, although it was personalized, as what you do. Things that help you if you are feeling down, things that help you who can't sleep at night. And again, I gave some scaffolding here. It helps me if. And I agree with you that students do need that scaffolding. They need some kind of structure which helps them. Some of them use it, some of them don't. Other people will do, students who are more advanced will obviously branch out and do their own thing. Activity 4, odd one out, was relatively easy, as one of you pointed out there. And again, I gave an example. I could have done something like all the others ... and given that also as a scaffolding. I didn't, as it happened. Activity 4, which was actually the most popular, according to your poll, of all of them, all the differences you can think about the 2 pictures, I gave no scaffolding at all. But this was fairly simple, okay? Girl A has blue eyes, girl B has brown eyes. I mean, you could do very, very simple stuff here as well as very, very difficult. And we'll discuss in a moment what gets student motivated to write. So some factors which came up here were firstly personal relevance. Now I put a query by that. Personal relevance obviously worked very strongly in the one about what do you do if you can't sleep, or what do you do if you're feeling down. But on the other hand, what did I do last weekend is also personal. So why did that score so low? And I think this is worth thinking about, because just making it personal does not necessarily make something interesting. What I did last weekend, what I hope to do tomorrow, what I do every day. You know, this practice of the present simple in younger grades. They're all very personal, but they are not interesting. So that's not enough.
Well, if you said,
Does
if
yes,
you said,
Miriam?
sorry, if you said something like, write down 2 funny things that you did over the weekend.
Not everyone would be able to think of something. I can't think of anything funny I did over the weekend off the top of my head. Maybe
Okay,
I just don't have a
strange,
sense of humor.
interesting, I agree, strange, interesting, or
But
whatever.
I take your point. It's not
Hmm.
just what I did, but give some kind of focus, right?
Yeah, exactly. That might
Yeah,
make it because
yeah.
the word paragraph probably was the
Paragraph puts you off
yeah,
to start
put
with,
some no fun. No fun.
In our group, someone mentioned that the personal aspect here might be off-putting to some students, because if they're from lower socioeconomic in a Kfar Noar and didn't do anything, and they might not want to share that, which is part
That's
of
a
the
good
reason I've
point.
just written in
That's
the
a good point.
comments,
Yeah,
maybe
you have to
some
be
choice.
very
What you
careful.
did over the weekend, or
Whereas
what you
in
did.
the other personal one, which is what you do when you're feeling down, everybody sometimes feels down. Everybody sometimes has problems falling asleep, and everyone has different things they can do with it. And some of your responses there were very interesting, and I think would be interesting to share in the classroom. I lost my chat. Yes, Moshe says, I think students would be interested in sharing what they did over the weekend, but put off by having to write it. Yeah, well, I'm not sure they'd be even interested in showing what they did over the weekend. Some of them, and I think Amy's comment here about the differences between students might put them off. To come back to success orientation and doability, I think this is really, really important, that it should be easy for them to do. And someone already mentioned this in the discussion, that it's just very difficult sometimes for students to write, and we need to make sure that that they can do it. Now, the uses of a pen is amazingly difficult. I've done it lots of times in class. It is very difficult because it demands an enormous amount of vocabulary. And someone said quite rightly, we need to give them the vocabulary. But the problem is that if you give them the vocabulary on the board, that immediately dictates what they're going to say. And the whole point is to have them be creative. So it's possibly a better idea just to make yourself mobile and to walk around the classroom and allow yourself to tell them different words as they need them. But it is the uses of pencil is actually for a more advanced class. It's suitable even for Yud Aleph, I would say. It's much more difficult than the other 4 activities, as in my experience. So the exercise does need to be doable. It has to be based on simple sentences. And this is the reason why the picture one was so popular. It is very easy to write simple sentences about pictures of people and to indicate differences between them. So it's success orientation, doability, I should have said easiness, you know, that sort of thing, that they should feel, I can do this. They immediately see the activity and they say, right, I'm able to do this. It's within my capabilities. I can succeed. I think that's a really, really important aspect. The other one, which I think is really important, is visual materials. And the other reason why the picture one was so successful, to have something to look at, pictures, visuals of different kinds, graphics, really make a difference. They give them a focus and helps them to think. Or with younger students to draw themselves, not usually at the level you're teaching, but certainly younger students. Yes, Maria writes, regarding activity 2 and focus, I sometimes ask students to think of name one good, one bad, and one weird thing that happened to them last week. Yes, I would I would open that out a little bit and say, think of at least one of each and more if you can. In other words, they might not be able to think of a bad thing, or they might not be able to think of a weird thing, but they can think of other things. So I wouldn't ask them, make them do all three exactly, but give them the option of thinking of doing at least one good thing, and if they can think of a bad thing and a weird thing as well to add, please do that. I'll come on to this this aspect of choice in a moment when I talk about heterogeneity. Visual materials, I said, playful challenge or game-like process, and this brings me on to the topic of games and language play. Someone mentioned gamification in your earlier brainstorm, and I'd really like to add this. I think the challenge, and that's why Maria's idea of one good, one bad, and one weird thing, rather than what did you do last weekend, is much better. Maria's idea is much better because it adds a little bit of a challenge, a little bit of a twist, a little bit of a focus to get them thinking. And Sarah adds what they didn't do. Yes, also. I mean, just to think slightly different, think out of the box, rather than doing the conventional thing of what did you do last weekend, what did you do last summer, these things which come up again and again. And this brings me to the topic of games and language play, which I want to spend a little time when you can sit back, so I'm not going to make you work anymore, or not very much. I'm going to do the work myself for a few minutes. Games and language play. And there's a difference. And it's easier to express in English because English has two words, play and game. A lot of languages don't. I don't know about Arabic. I'd like one of you to write in the chat box whether Arabic uses the same word, but Hebrew uses the same basic root, lesachek, for both, as does Spanish, French, German. A lot of languages do. English, luckily, has these two words, play and games, or to play, period, and to play games as a whole expression. And I want to express that there's a difference and draw your attention to it and see what it has to tell us about successful writing activities. Play is an activity that is, first of all, time out. It's not done for, in our normal conversation, transactional conversation, not a serious part of getting on with things in life. It's time out. It involves a challenge, usually an easy challenge, one which we know we can do. It's enjoyable, fun, and or aesthetically pleasing. So, okay, in one of our sessions we wrote poems. That was language play. It's aesthetically pleasing as well as being funny. And it gives us a sensation of pleasure, and it's time out. It does not involve motive of gain or profit. This has to do obviously with time out. Games, excuse my capital A there, don't know what happened to me, is a subset of play. In other words, it's also time out with an achievable challenge. It's pleasing, no profit motive, but in addition, it has these other aspects. It's much more structured, and it has explicit rules, much clearer, explicit rules. It aims at the achievement of some kind of goal, which implies scores, winning and losing, and it is usually competitive. You usually have two teams against each other or individuals against each other. And I think we need to bear in mind that there is an essential difference between the two, and they affect the way we design language activities. Have a look at these pictures. I haven't got many pictures in this presentation today. Sorry to bore you by a lot of text, but here's some pictures just to vary yourself. On the right is a football game. On the left, kids are kicking a ball around. They are playing at football. They are not actually competing in a game. Now, look at the expressions on their faces and their body language. And there's some very interesting differences there. Let me point them out to you. In play, the process is more important than the outcome. In games, the outcome is at least as important, if not more important. Play produces smiles. Look at the guy in the yellow shirt is actually smiling. The guys in the blue shirts have relaxed expressions on their faces. Look at the expressions on the faces of the girls who are actually in the football game. Very, very tense and stressed. No winners or losers. They're just kicking the ball around and enjoying it. In the game, in the football game, there are winners or losers. There's no built-in time limit. You go on for as long as you're enjoying it, and then you stop when you've had enough. Games, outcome at least as important as process, may or may not produce smiles. Sometimes it does. In this case, obviously not. They're very stressed, but it may or may not produce smiles. There are winners and losers, and there is a built-in time limit, and it is not exactly stressful, but certainly very adrenaline raising. Now, when I gave you the task of finding as many things you can do with a pencil, there are two ways you can do this. You can do it as a game, or you can do it as a play. If it is a game, then you're trying to find as many things as you can, and the winner is the one who found the most. Or, if you're doing it in teams, the team who found the most. And then, in my experience, you waste an awful lot of lesson time working out who got more, and whether if I repeated the same thing as someone else did, do I get a point or don't I get a point? And it's also a lot more stressful. Whereas if you just do it as, let's share the things we found and enjoy them, it becomes play. It is far more effective in the sense that they have much more time for writing and less time reading it out and arguing about who got more points. On the whole, therefore, it's becoming clear that I'm very much in favour of play rather than games. I'm not saying that games are no good. Sometimes games can be very nice, team games and so on. But I think we need also to make a place for a time and a space for play, because it produces a lot of fun and motivation, and it lowers stress. Language games, for example, these, okay? Team games, individual competitions, all these are games. They have a winner, they have a loser, they have scoring. Language play, on the other hand, is things like brainstorming ideas to solutions to a problem, like the uses of a pencil, composing poems, inventing endings, funny endings, different endings to sentences, making different combinations of various kinds, finding connections, differences, like the two pictures, for example, is playing with language, and so on. So of the writing activities we did, which had elements of play and games, number 2 obviously had neither. It was just a straightforward writing exercise. Uses of pencil, clearly, I've already elucidated, it could be either a game or just play, depending on whether you score it and announce winners at the end. And I'm very much in favour in this particular case of simply doing it for fun and not worrying about scores and who wins and who loses. What helps is only loosely language play, not so obviously as uses of pencil, but also odd one out is clearly language play, and results in interesting results which we can share and think about, and pictures also. just playing with the idea of pictures. And the effectiveness of the activity has a lot to do with how much we manage to involve language play. In spoken Arabic, thanks to Liz. That's interesting. In spoken Arabic, we use the same word. In written Arabic, we have separate words. Written Arabic in the whole is a more developed language, isn't it? It has more words altogether. And that's a very interesting result. Thank you very much for that. I'll bring it into my next lecture when I deal with this issue. Salaf says, showing a picture where students have to describe what's happening, describe feelings, emotions, the character in the picture, to guess what's the story. Yes, I would call that language play, and I think it's a lovely activity. Again, playing with ideas, playing with what I imagine, and producing a lot of language. Okay, I'll stop for a second, and if anyone wants to comment on what I've said during this section. My pupils become very stressed when having to write, yes. And I'll be dealing with this in the next section, how to get them to write a lot without becoming stressed. Yes, okay. Any other comments anyone would like to add to this discussion? Again, this distinction between play and games, I did a whole hour session on it at IATEFL a couple of months ago, and a lot of people said that they'd never even thought about the difference and came and thanked me for pointing it out. So I think it's an interesting distinction, and one which is worth thinking about. Could connections be a writing game? I'm not quite sure what you mean, Sana. Could you explain? Maybe unmute yourself and explain.
It's like the connections in the New York Times, even in Israel, they have them. It's 60
yeah.
squares, okay, and they all belong to a different category. Now, the connections I'm talking about are very difficult, but for example, if we start elementary, and then you could say, for example, it could be many things. If you say chair, table, whatever, chair, table, trying to think of
Yeah,
another
I think
one.
the problem with the connections, that you mean the New York Times connections.
Yeah, but make
activity,
it
right?
easier. I would make it.
I think that the problem with that is that it has one right answer. And the thing about play is that very often there are lots of right answers, and you can play about with all sorts of variations. And so, yes, if you say, let's say two things, find as many connections as you can between them, then that would be play.
That's
But
what I
if there's
meant.
one
Yeah,
right
that's what I meant.
connection, then it's not so interesting.
Okay. So in other words, but we can use it in a way, like for example, find connections between the words. Like for example, and that could open it up. For example, let's say a table, chair, and you can have many things. What you would find in a school, what you would find in a house, what you would find in a waiting room. I don't know what else. Or things.
Yeah, anything which is challenging, which is within their knowledge and within their ability, and they feel they can do it, and they can have lots of different ideas. I think that is a playful way of writing. And
so you're saying it is a
Judy
good idea.
says, I think one of the considerations, which students do you want to get more involved in a given activity, the rowdy competitive ones or the more quiet and shy students. If I am writing, I'm not allowing to be rowdy. They have to be quiet because they're writing. And therefore I want to try it. Writing is actually a lovely way of encouraging the quieter students because they don't have to make their voice heard. Everyone is writing at the same time. Michelle, new game called Loop. Okay, right, and tell me about it. I don't know about this one. Thanks. Note taking is a whole other topic, you're right. Or comparing two, yes, this is a lovely idea. Comparing two characters to help them take notes on a story we're reading. Okay, for example, comparing Yumi and Hannah in The Enemy in short sentences. Yes, that's the very similar activity to the comparing pairing of the two pictures. It's also a playful activity. It's open-ended. It is accessible. It can be done. You can write 2 sentences or 10 sentences. Yes. Yes. Thank you, Maria. There's also Latin word ludum. And for those of you who have time and energy, I really recommend the book Homo Ludens, which means the man as a player or a game player, which talks about the whole idea that actually culture is essentially based on play. And Huizinga, the author of Homo Ludens, would include in play literature, ritual, games, obviously, and a whole lot of other things, poetry, a whole lot of other things. And if you have the energy to look it up or to find an AI summary of it, I highly recommend it. The title of the book, thank you, Tom, Homo Ludens, exactly. And the author is a guy called
It is originally in Deutsch.
You found it. He's Dutch. Yes.
Dutch, sorry.
It was originally written in Dutch and yeah, and translated. Thank you very much, Tom. And thank you for the link to the Wikipedia. That's great. Okay, I'm now going to move on to my final topic, which is providing for different level in writing tasks. And I'm going to do this as a set of tips rather than as a lecture. And again, please feel free to come into the chat box to respond. Tip 1. I just want to come back to the heading again, just to clarify what I meant to. I have a group who are of different levels. Some write very easily and fluently and have a good level of English, and others find it much, much more difficult and can write much less in the given time because they write slowly. You need to give a task which caters for your different levels. So, tip 1, variation, this is a fairly obvious one. You can't, Abraham Lincoln is said to have said, you can fool some of the people all of the time and all of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. And for us teachers, we can teach some of the students all of the time and all of the students some of the time. We can't teach all of the students all of the time, and therefore we need to give different types of writing tasks at different times, so that if inevitably we have neglected one student one day, we try not to neglect him the next. So variation. Vary the type of writing task according to various parameters. So time, how long you give them to write. So you might one day give them only 2 minutes to write, another day give them 10 minutes or even 20 minutes to write, to give them different times, different length of writing, different genres. So one time it might be a poem, one time it might be a paragraph, one time it might be a list or a brainstorm, another time it might be a set of sentences, different genres, different audience they're writing for, if they're writing for you or writing for each other. And importantly, and I'll come back to this later, register whether it's to be written in formal English or in informal English. We've discussed this in a previous session. And finally, whether it is assessed or not assessed. And I'll be talking about assessment in a separate session. It's a whole topic on its own, which needs dealing with in depth. Tip 2, provide a choice. Okay, so a choice of tasks or topics for students to choose from. For example, if I give the find the odd one out, instead of giving one sentence, I might give 3 or 4 sentences and say, choose whichever one you want to do and work on that. instead of just giving one, which they have to work on. So that gives them a little bit of choice. And some lists, some might be easier and some might be slightly more difficult. So they can choose between options. Or instead of what you did last weekend, some of the other suggestions which some of you have suggested, which could vary this one. So they have different things to choose from. Tip 3, provide a list of vocabulary items relevant to the task, but make it clear that students don't have to use them if they don't have to. So for your weaker students, they have a list which they can use. And for the stronger students, they can just ignore them and use their own. So you've got the varied possibility. Same thing with scaffolding. So you might provide a sample sentence, as I did in one or two of the tasks, which they can use if they wish, but they don't have to. So some scaffolding available, but not necessary. Tip 4, time.
Michelle has posted the final attendance form. Just take note, everybody. The link is in the chat of the Zoom.
Thanks, Gail. Okay. Tip 4 is give a time limit rather than length of text limit. So not you have to write 4 sentences, but you've got 5 minutes to do as much as you can. Okay. And this immediately allows for students to write at their own pace. So some will write more, some will write less, but everyone writes at their own pace. And they don't have to feel that because they haven't done 10 sentences, they are inferior, or if they've done more than 10 sentences, that they are brilliant. They can do whatever feels right for them, whatever is enough for them, for their speed and ability in writing. Tip 5 is a useful one. It's called core and optional. And what it means is give them something which everybody has to do, which is very easy and everybody can do it, and add an optional addition that students may or may not do. Okay, so for example, you have to write at least 3 differences between the 2 pictures. If you want to do more, you can, but you have to write 3. And a corollary of this is you might want to make it your optional thing compulsory for some bright but lazy students. That's up to you, and you know your students, so you know which you might want to make it compulsory for. Okay, and we're on to the final section of this presentation today, the assignment. First, I'm asking you to read an article, but if you look at the article, you'll see it's only 2 pages, so it's not very long. And it's called Generating Motivation in Writing Lessons. And I'd like you to read it, please. And it's shown in the Moodle. And then the assignment is to answer 3 questions, which are these. You can read them for yourself. You can read them quietly when you go into the Moodle and find it. And it's very much what I'm looking for here is your own thinking about motivation, and specifically about the motivational ideas for writing that Salam brings up in the article, and comparing them in some ways to the ideas which I've brought up in this session. Finally, activity. Promised you an activity every time. 100 and 200 words. This is standard for all the optional activities. You remember 5 assignments, for the 5 assignments which you have to do in order to get credit for this course. The 5 short assignments are always between 100 and 200 words, though you can make them a little bit longer if you like. Final bit of every presentation of mine for this course, classroom activity. Here's a classroom activity. If any, I hope most of you, the Bagrut people, Bagrut teachers, obviously not teaching Bagrut classes, but I hope the rest of you are still teaching. So it's called Qualities, and it can be done either for homework or in class, and it goes as follows. So you choose one of the jobs functions, ask them to choose. Here's the element of choice coming up. And then the compulsory aspect, the core, remember I've talked about core plus optional. The core is what you have to do is make a list of at least 10 important qualities you feel this person should have. And it could be she should have, this person should have, should be able to. It can be all sorts of things. You might even start it in class with some ideas for given orally for one of the functions. And then optionally, and again, for your more advanced students, you probably have to tell them, I expect you to do this bit, expand this into a short essay. And there's a short essay about the qualities that you think these different functions should have. Okay, and that's enough for me for this time. I'll see you next week. Both the assignment and the activity, well, the activity is within the presentation, which is already open for you to look again at on the Moodle, and the rest of it also on the Moodle. The assignment is on the Moodle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Very
your
much.
compliments.
Very much.
Glad you
Good night.
found it helpful.
Thank you, Penny.